Everybody, my name is Lynn Johnson and I'm a dietary counsellor and sports nutritionist and a fourth year nutritional therapy student, final year. So the perfect nutritional strategy really starts well before and finishes well after your event. So if you're planning on doing the mini marathon in a few weeks, today's the time to start the strategy. Some of the points we're going to cover this evening are what are carbohydrates and what is glycogen, the concept of carb loading, which I'm sure you've all heard of, nutrient timing before the event, refueling during the event and whether or not it's necessary depending on the distance or the time it's going to take you, and very important, that window post-event within 30 minutes and the optimum foods to eat then. Following that through into the evening meal, and of course hydration. So what are carbohydrates? Carbohydrates are one of the three macronutrients that make up our foods. So we have carbohydrates, we have fats and we have protein. And carbohydrates are found in foods like fruits and vegetables, and also in starchy foods like breads, pasta and rice. And we need them to supply calories for energy, we need them to build glycogen in the body, which we're going to talk about in a minute, to aid in post-exercise recovery, and also to act as a easily digested fuel source. But not all carbohydrates are created equal. The glycemic load of a carbohydrate is the measure of the rate which it is digested and converted into glucose. And it's been shown that when you consume low glycemic load carbohydrates before exercise, it lessens the risk of hypoglycemia. And hypoglycemia is when there's a drop in blood sugar which is caused by the really fast digestion of the carbohydrates you've eaten. And this hypoglycemia can leave you feeling weak and fatigued, which is obviously something that you want to avoid in the middle of a run or in the middle of a marathon. So a good metaphor to kind of take on board that theory is that high glycemic foods is like burning a piece of paper. It's going to burn really, really quickly. It's not going to give you sustained energy. Whereas low glycemic foods is like burning firewood. You're going to get a really bright flame and it's going to last for a much longer period. So the highs and the lows. Your high glycemic carbohydrates are going to be things like white bread, actually brown bread as well really, breakfast cereals, sweets, biscuits, cakes, fizzy drinks, all those nice things. And then your low glycemic carbohydrates are probably ones you've heard referred to as complex carbohydrates, which would be your root vegetables, sweet potatoes, butternut squash, things like oats, quinoa, all the brown counterparts of the white foods. So carbohydrates are then broken down as glucose, and glucose is stored in the liver and in the muscles as glycogen. And when we need fuel for exercise, this glycogen is broken down into glucose. So when your glycogen is low, your glucose is going to be low, and that's going to contribute to fatigue. So some of the things we're going to go through this evening are going to be about making sure your glycogen stores are optimal when you're training and when you're racing. So I mentioned the good nutritional strategies start well in advance. So the weeks before, which would be from today if you're doing the mini marathon, some general nutritional advice would be to increase your fruit and vegetable. Ideally you want to be aiming for 7 portions of vegetables per day, 2 of fruit, at least 5 of vegetables with all the colours. Removing the white from the diet, so taking out the white bread, the white pasta, eliminating sugar, so your cakes, your biscuits, your sweets, they've very little nutritional value. Increasing your water intake, so at a minimum usually 2 litres a day, maybe more depending on your activity level and your body size. And choosing good quality meats. We've established there's no vegetarians, so meats, eggs, nuts and seeds, lentils, pulses and stuff like that. And choosing good sources of fats, so that's where your avocados, coconut oil, oily fish like salmon and anchovies. They're really good omega-3 fats. So carb loading, I'm sure you've all heard of this. Full carb loading is when you eat an awful lot of carbohydrates in the days coming up to the event without doing a lot of training or a lot of exercise. Now, it takes your body about 90 minutes to deplete its glycogen stores. So for short runs like a 10K, it doesn't really apply, because it's like having a full tank of gas versus having half a tank of gas when you're just going to go to the shops for a short spin. It doesn't really matter. And also too much carbohydrates the few days coming up to the event can make you feel heavy, lethargic and slow. And also you will have access to fuel during the event, which is, if you need it, you can top it up. So what I would advocate for 10Ks and distances like that would be small amounts of slow release carbs in 2 to 3 of the meals in the 2 to 3 days preceding the event. So they don't have to be huge portions. Small amounts of oats with your breakfast, or quinoa or brown rice with lunch, sweet potatoes with your dinner, things like that. So the morning of the race, and the perfect pre-race meal will prevent hunger and be easily digested. And you want to aim to eat far enough in advance that the food is being digested and you're minimising the risk of intestinal discomfort, but not so far in advance that you're going to get hungry during the race. So around 2 to 4 hours before the event is usually a good guide for this. So this will allow enough time for your stomach to empty sufficiently, allow your blood sugars to settle out, and to top up those glycogen stores that we talked about. So, as I said, the low GL meal the morning of will give you that sustained energy, but with the addition of some protein to help minimise muscle damage. So I have some examples there. You could look at oat cakes with nut butters, so peanut butter, cashew nut butter, things like that. Some homemade breakfast muffins, not the sugary commercial kind. You could have some oats with some milk, topped with some berries or some nuts and seeds. A small bowl of brown pasta with some tuna if you're going to have it mid-morning. You don't have to stick to the breakfast foods. Or even like a mixed bean or lentil stew kind of thing, a small bowl of that would work as well. What you really want to do on the morning of the race is avoid anything too high in fat or too high in fibre. Anything too filling, too spicy, too salty. Basically anything that's going to run the risk of giving you any kind of intestinal discomfort. It's not the morning to test your digestion, and it's not the morning to try out any new foods. So if you've been dying to try bulletproof coffee, don't do it that morning. An hour before the race, you might find you'd need a small snack. It's not always necessary, but if you do feel like you need something, you could go for just a small piece of fruit, a low sugar fruit like a peach, or a cup of berries would work. Now, refueling during the race. So during sessions lasting less than 60 minutes, there's no performance advantage to be gained by taking in additional carbohydrates. 60 to 90 minutes, some people might find they do need something and it can be beneficial, but it can be as simple as just swilling a drink around your mouth or sucking on a sweet, because we actually have carbohydrate receptors in our mouth, and it's enough to trigger the brain to tell them that there's fuel coming, and it overrides your perception of effort and fatigue. So that's as little as you need to do. If it's going over 90 minutes, or if you feel like you need something, again, a banana or a handful of raisins, these are high glycemic foods that will give you that energy burst. Or you could go for an isotonic drink. You can either make your own, 250 ml of fruit juice topped up to a litre with water and a little quarter of a teaspoon of salt to give you some electrolytes. Or you can use coconut water, which is a natural isotonic.
Sorry, do you mean like a dilutable fruit juice?
Yeah. The stuff that I usually tell you not to touch. Yeah. So when your race is done, you have 30 minutes. This is when your body is screaming for fuel, And this is when you can have those high glycemic foods. Now, not the white bread or the breakfast cereals, but things like dried fruit or bananas or liquid forms of high glycemic things. And the good nutrition here is going to help you recover quicker, it's going to help you rehydrate, it's going to help you refuel, it's going to help you build muscle, and it's going to help you improve any future performance. So, as I said, a high glycemic carbohydrate to enhance the restoration of glycogen stores with some protein. The protein helps bring the insulin into the cells. So you could have a recovery smoothie if you drink milk. Add some milk to some yogurt, a banana, high glycemic, some berries, just for flavour really, and 2 or 3 dates. Or if you fancy something a bit more liquid, again, you could go for your coconut water with a scoop of protein powder. Whey is the best, is the gold standard with protein powder. And again, your banana, your berries, and your dates. Or if you feel like you can handle some solid food after running a race, you could have a protein bar, but have it with some fruit juice to get that sugar into you as well. And then for your evening meal or the meal following the race, 2 to 3 hours later, we're going to follow that pattern again, but we're dropping back down to the low glycemic carbohydrates again. And we're moving towards a shift to more solid food. So again, you're going for your starchy vegetables, sweet potato, butternut squash, brown rice or quinoa. And then good quality animal protein is best because it has the complete complex of amino acids that you need to increase protein synthesis. And last but not least, hydration. So very important to drink enough before the event that you can fill and empty your bladder. And make sure you take into account, if we're talking about the marathon, travel time, warm-up time, waiting around time, and use this time to drink the fluids without overhydrating. Sometimes you could lose up to 1.5 litres to 2 litres of fluids before you even get that thirst sensation. So it's handy to follow a guide to avoid that. So 2 hours before the activity, 500 ml to 750 ml. 15 to 20 minutes before the activity, 250 ml to 500 ml, and then every 15 minutes, 125 to 185 ml, and then within 2 hours you want to drink around another half a litre, and you want to drink enough water until the urine runs clear again. And obviously, try and avoid too many diuretics like alcohol, and alcohol sounds a bit obvious, you're not going to drink that before a race, but tea and coffee, even the night before, and too much tea and coffee can dehydrate some people. So just to recap then, coming up to the event, practice your clean eating, so that means starting today. Carb loading light a day or 2 before the event. The morning of, you're looking at low glycemic carbohydrates with some protein. If you need refueling during the event, prior to the event, if you need it, just a small piece of fruit should be enough. Again, refueling during the event, if you need it, you can go for some isotonic drinks or a small piece of high glycemic fruit. And then high glycemic carbs and protein in that window, that 30-minute window is very tight. That's when you really need to get that protein and that glucose into you. And then follow that up at the evening meal after with your low glycemic carbs. And that's it. And our friends at Coconut Water have actually given us samples for everyone to take home, so make sure you take some on your way out.